Welcome to the Mystery and History channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. The Miss Universe pageant held its first edition in 1952, bringing together representatives from different countries such as Turkey, France, Norway, India, Denmark, and Great Britain, marking the beginning of an event that influenced global beauty standards and international cultural exchange. The selection of Hungarian Jews at Auschwitz, recorded in 1944, represents one of the most tragic chapters of the Holocaust, a landmark of World War II in which millions lost their lives because of systematic decisions by the German government, creating global repercussions. The episode of Flight 571, which occurred in the Andes in October 1972, became known for the ordeal of its survivors, who spent 2 months isolated after the plane crash, resorting to extreme measures to endure harsh conditions and long days waiting for rescue. The standoff between protesters and state forces in Moscow in 1993 marked the most serious constitutional crisis in post-Soviet Russia, when parliament was attacked by military vehicles under presidential orders, consolidating executive power and deeply changing the country's political path. Members of an extremist group appear on a Ferris wheel in 1926, a period when the group was gaining strength in the United States, especially in the South, promoting extremist ideologies and strong racial segregation, a factor that deeply shaped the country's social history. Members of the so-called Congress of Freaks from the Ringling Brothers Circus posed together in 1924, showing an era when attractions considered unusual were presented as entertainment in the United States, reinforcing debates about social exclusion and ethics in show business. Sir Frederick Trevis stood out in British medicine for the innovative treatment he gave Joseph Merrick, known as the Elephant Man, and for saving the life of King Edward VII in 1884, an episode that brought him prestige and contributed to advances in surgical methods of the period. Robert Huddleston, known as the Pony Boy, had a life marked by circus work for 36 years between 1895 and 1970, in a context where people with physical differences were often featured in popular traveling shows in the 19th and 20th centuries. The skeletons known as the Longest Kiss, dated to about 2,800 years ago, were discovered in a double tomb, suggesting a strong symbolic or emotional connection between the individuals in ancient society. Excavations of this kind help explain burial practices and social bonds from that time. Betty Page, whose peak came in 1954, became a cultural phenomenon by challenging social standards with her photo shoots in the 1950s, symbolizing changes in women's image and behavior in post-war America, and influencing later generations. Bob Marley, a reference in music and activism, appears in 1977 with his toe bandaged during a tour, an injury linked to a serious health condition that would mark his final years, symbolizing the impact of physical well-being on the path of global cultural icons of that period. Raquel Welch became a pop culture icon after her role in the film 1 Million Years Before Christ, released in 1966, a period when bikini fashion was changing behavior and visual standards in cinema, cementing her striking image in the global imagination. The military response to the movement known as the Prague Spring in 1968 marked the strengthening of the communist regime in Czechoslovakia, frustrating attempts at democratization and consolidating Soviet influence in Central Europe during the Cold War. Harry Sundance Kid Longabaugh became famous as a member of the Wild Bunch Gang, which gained notoriety in the American Old West between the late 19th and early 20th centuries, taking part in bank and train robberies and symbolizing the transition toward a modernizing United States. Pies Headwin, a representative of the Potawatomi people, appears beside other people in front of his house on a farm in Kansas in 1877, a period marked by the forced displacement of many indigenous nations as a result of American policy removing tribes from the eastern United States. Celebrated by thousands in the streets of Moscow, the Soviet victory over Germany was officially marked on May 9, 1945, signaling the end of World War II in Europe and establishing the Soviet Union as a military and political power on the international stage. American soldiers celebrated their return to the United States at the end of World War II in 1945. A milestone that represented the Allied victory and the beginning of global reconstruction, deeply changing world geopolitics and the lives of millions of families. Albert Einstein, in September 1939, spent quiet moments with his friend David Rothman on a Long Island beach, just days after the start of World War II, a period when his warnings about nuclear weapons decisively influenced the course of history. German soldiers gathered around a Christmas tree on the Eastern Front during World War I take part in a rare moment of fellowship during the conflict, showing how cultural traditions continued even amid the harsh reality of the trenches. The arrival of a German stowaway at Ellis Island in 1907 illustrates the intense flow of European immigrants to the United States in the early 20th century, when the country became established as a destination of hope and opportunity, shaping new American social dynamics. Revolutionary leaders often sought refuge during periods of crisis, as happened in Gorky in 1922, when internal Russian instability reached its peak after the Civil War, marking the beginning of the Soviet regime and major political and social changes in the country. After the end of World War II in 1945, masterpieces such as the Mona Lisa began returning to museums, marking the major effort to recover cultural heritage taken by the German regime, a key step in restoring European cultural life. F.E. Yates appears on his custom motorcycle around the 1900s, a period marked by innovations in motorized transportation in the United States and Europe, expanding personal mobility and encouraging the rise of motorcycle clubs and competitions. A woman celebrates her birthday in Iran in 1973, a period of relative social and cultural freedom in the country, just 5 years before the Islamic Revolution of 1979. This historical transformation marked the end of the monarchy and the beginning of restrictions in Iranian society. The work of female police officers enforcing women's bathing suit rules marked the 1920s, when strict rules determined the length and style of beach clothing, illustrating social control over women's customs during that period of cultural transition. French women accused of collaboration with German occupiers faced public exposure when their heads were shaved at the end of World War II, a symbolic measure marked by the Allied victory over the German regime and the desire for national reconstruction after the war. Raquel Welch gained international attention in 1966, establishing herself as a film icon and a symbol of an era shaped by the cultural revolution of the 1960s, when Hollywood promoted new female stars and pushed changes in beauty standards and social behavior. The slogan, Smysl polityki KSC Blaho Člověka, reflects the propaganda of the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia, especially after the regime was consolidated under Soviet influence after the war, when the government sought to legitimize its authority by promising human welfare above all else. In daily life in what was then East Germany, a woman gets ready in front of a portrait of Erich Honecker, leader of the socialist regime of the German Democratic Republic during the 1970s, a symbol of state control over private life and the strong political propaganda typical of that Cold War phase. At the height of the Black Hills Gold Rush, the place called Gayville in Deadwood Gulch appeared in 1876 as part of the expansion into indigenous territories, driving settlement in Dakota Territory and accelerating conflicts with Native peoples historically connected to the region. The 1910 Antarctic expedition led by Robert Falcon Scott stood out as one of the milestones of polar exploration, marking the British search for the South Pole, whose historical importance lies in scientific progress and the dramatic consequences for the team, preserving the event in collective memory. Italian soldiers faced major logistical challenges during World War I while defending strategic positions in the Italian Alps in 1915, a setting marked by intense fighting and extreme conditions that influenced both the local outcome and the broader dynamics of the European conflict. After a fire fought in below-freezing temperatures, frozen fire trucks recorded in 1920 became a symbol of the challenges faced by rescue crews before later technological advances, showing the harsh reality of major urban centers in that decade. Two young men risked themselves on top of a train on an elevated bridge, a scene typical of the railroad expansion in the United States in 1908, when railroad development was crucial for territorial integration and American economic growth. The Graf Zeppelin flying over the pyramids of Giza in 1931 symbolized technological progress and the golden age of airships, drawing local and international attention to Egypt while connecting continents and inspiring admiration for air exploration in one of the world's most iconic historical settings. Engine Alley witnessed daily life in Dublin in 1900, a period marked by strong urban growth and social tensions, when much of the Irish population lived under British rule, faced poor conditions, and took part in early movements for self-government. Members of the Khoikhoi people, known for their traditional adaptation to the dry conditions of the Kalahari Desert, use ostrich eggshells to store water, an ancestral survival practice documented in 1955 when the region was called Southwest Africa. Storing 5 megabytes in 1966 required an impressive 62,500 punched cards, a common technology in the early era of business computing. This process took 4 days to complete, showing the challenges of data processing before later digital advances. The arrival of swimmobiles on New York streets in 1960 marked an innovative effort by city officials to make recreation and swimming lessons more accessible, bringing mobile pools to underserved neighborhoods and fighting unequal opportunities in urban areas. British inventor Captain W.H. Richards appears beside Eric Robot, one of the first functional humanoid robots shown to the public during the British exhibition in London in 1928, highlighting the beginning of the modern robotics era and its potential for technological progress. About 152 black cats were selected for an audition in Hollywood in 1961 as producers searched for an animal to appear in the film Tales of Terror. This kind of unusual selection shows how the American film industry worked in the early 1960s, when major productions tried to attract audiences with both human stars and curious elements, demonstrating the impact of entertainment and pop culture on American society. Marcia Pinkenfield was recognized as the most beautiful child in America in a contest held in 1927 in the United States, showing the popularity of children's beauty competitions and the growing interest of American society in media and popular contests during that decade. The relationship between Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor began during the filming of Cleopatra in the early 1960s, a period that shaped not only film culture, but also redefined celebrity standards in Hollywood, affecting the tabloid era and public perception. The marriage of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Maria Shriver in 1986 marked the union of two prominent figures in the international media world, reflecting both the bodybuilder's rise to Hollywood stardom and Shriver's connection to the influential Kennedy family in the United States. Carrie Fisher beside her mother, Debbie Reynolds, in 1972 shows the bond between two central figures in American entertainment at a time when Hollywood was consolidating generations of artists and foreshadowing Fisher's rise as an international star in Star Wars 5 years later. Albert Einstein, photographed by Arthur Lowenthal in Berlin in 1930, was already internationally recognized for the Nobel Prize in Physics he received in 1921, symbolizing the energy of Germany's scientific world before the deep changes brought by Germany's political rise. Global music icon John Lennon appears in the early 1970s beside his son Julian on a Honda Monkey bike, showing the period when he sought greater family closeness after the Beatles ended in 1970, a key moment in his personal path. John Travolta, an internationally recognized celebrity, received his first pilot license in 1978, reflecting the passion many late 20th century artists had for private aviation, a trend that grew along with broader access to aviation and its cultural value in the 1980s. Arnold Schwarzenegger and Grace Jones became movie icons after appearing in the film Conan the Destroyer, released in 1984, strengthening the era of epic fantasy cinema that marked the 1980s and expanded the international popularity of these actors. Elvis Presley fans caused major excitement at shows in the southern United States, such as in Florida in 1956, showing the impact of the rise of rock and roll on young people at the time, which led to social concern about music's influence on popular culture. The Runaways, a group formed by young women in the 1970s, made rock history by challenging gender standards in a male-dominated industry, becoming a symbol of women's empowerment and influencing later generations of rock around the world. A young John Cena appears beside Santa Claus in a photo taken in 1990, a period marked by the rise of pop culture and the strengthening of Christmas imagery in the United States, when family celebrations and festive symbols gained even more media attention. In the 1920s, cultural events such as the human chess game became popular in European cities, bringing crowds together to watch live versions of classic matches and reflecting society's fascination with playful traditions combined with artistic expression. Stagecoach transportation, such as the McLaughlin United States Mail, mentioned at the event at Jack Pearl's Ranch around the 1880s, played a key role in the expansion of the American West, allowing regular communication and contributing to the region's social and economic development. The Wells, Fargo and Company office in Virginia City, Nevada, around 1866, serves as a symbol of the impact of railroad expansion and express transportation in the Old West, energizing trade, connecting distant regions, and strengthening the economy during the gold and silver rushes. Groups of prospectors set out for new gold fields, driven by the gold fever that spread in the final decades of the 19th century, especially in territories of the western United States, quickly pushing migration flows and major regional economic transformation. The Wright-Craft scooter car drove through London in 1936, representing the search for urban mobility alternatives during the interwar period, when the automobile strengthened its role in major European cities, marking advances in personal transportation and influencing road design. The daily life of New York subway riders in 1963 reveals a routine shaped by habits such as reading printed newspapers, highlighting print media as the main source of information in that pre-digital period, and reflecting the urban energy of American society. In the busy London scene of 1929, the London Transport Lost Property Office in Lambeth organized lost items, such as umbrellas, which were essential for dealing with the city's rainy weather, showing the complexity of urban life during industrial growth. The first known aerial photograph, dating to 1860, marks a major advance in visual documentation and urban history because it made new ways of mapping and studying cities possible, changing how urban transformations were recorded. Henry Gifford presented his balloon for 50 passengers at the 1878 Paris World's Fair, showing the progress of air transportation in the 19th century, an experience that revealed the public's fascination with new technology and influenced future aviation innovations. Crews of the United States Army Air Forces, equipped with British goggles and specialized flight clothing, prepare for missions over Europe in 1942, the year B-17 bombers began operating from bases such as Polebrook, intensifying the Allied air campaign. Burmese women arrive in the United States in 1935 during a period when migration movements grew because of global changes such as economic crises, wars, and the search for new opportunities, a milestone that contributed to American cultural diversity. Robert Reynolds, a senator from North Carolina, became known in the 1930s for using nationalist rhetoric and supporting restrictive immigration policies, reflecting the fears of part of American society about the increase in foreigners after World War I. The routine of preparing and printing. The New York Times in 1942 illustrates a time when print journalism played a central role in shaping public opinion, especially during World War II, when fast access to accurate news was essential for society. Waiting for the subway in Stockholm in 1959 reflects an important phase of urban modernization in Sweden, when major cities expanded their public transportation systems, encouraging social integration and economic growth while strengthening the Swedish welfare state. Daily life for American farmers changed greatly, starting in the 1920s with the spread of radio, which represented a revolution in rural communication by allowing instant access to news, entertainment, and agricultural information, strengthening the national connection. A post-war European interior reveals traces of rationing faced by many countries after 1945, a period when resources such as food and drinks were strictly controlled by authorities, a situation that led to major changes in the population's consumption and supply habits. A gentleman greets a group of ladies by lifting his hat, a typical gesture of courtesy in the 1920s, a period marked by major cultural changes in large Western cities after World War I, reflecting social progress and a greater female presence in public spaces. In early 1921, supporters of the Republican and Democratic parties took part in a symbolic dispute in front of the Capitol in Washington during the presidential transition, a period that expressed tensions in American politics after World War I and reflected the democratic vitality of the United States. Elsie Janis, described as a 17-year-old sensation in 1906, gained attention by starring in the Broadway musical The Vanderbilt Cup, during a period marked by American fascination with automobile racing and entertainment culture, strengthening the rise of women on stage. The spread of certain beauty standards encouraged the rise of magazines and guides with fashion and behavior tips, especially among women in the 1960s, reinforcing pressure around appearance. This phenomenon affected generations and influenced how the body came to be viewed socially. Elite family women pose elegantly in 1912, a period marked by the rise of women's suffrage in several parts of the Western world, when debates about gender roles and civil rights began to challenge the traditional norms of patriarchal society. Central Park served as an important recreation spot for New Yorkers during World War II in 1942, a period marked by American mobilization and global tensions, offering the public moments of rest and normal life amid the war effort and rapid social changes. Women work assembling Sears and Roebuck catalogs in 1942 during World War II, when industrial mobilization and the female workforce in the United States intensified, driving social change and expanding access to new workplaces. Saloons such as the Man at the Wheel Saloon, popular in the late 19th century in English-speaking towns, served as social centers during the expansion of the Old West, showing the importance of these places for immigrants seeking leisure, quick meals, and drinks after long journeys. Oil companies such as Shell and Union played a key role in the urban and economic growth of the 20th century, expanding gas stations and helping cars become popular, which changed the way people lived in modern cities. The Rhino appeared as a response to the innovative spirit of the 1950s, a period marked by the search for technological advances during the Cold War, when experimental vehicles promised new solutions for military transportation and exploration across difficult terrain around the world. Margaret Ann Neve, born in 1792 and deceased in 1902, lived across 3 centuries of major political, social, and technological change, being a contemporary of the Industrial Revolution and the American Civil War, periods that shaped society and progress in the United States. Tourists explored Egypt in the 1920s and 1930s, when fascination with ancient Egypt drove expeditions and tourism, especially after the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, making the region an iconic destination and shaping the Western imagination. Indian pilots of the Royal Air Force enjoy a tea break on November 22, 1940, during the World War II, showing the integration of British Empire colonies into the Allied war effort, which was essential to the campaign in Asia and North Africa. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, please use the Super Thanks tool below. Your contribution helps us keep bringing you amazing historical content. Thank you so much for your support, and see you in the next video.